If you like what you hear on this podcast, please help us grow. A 5-star review on Apple Podcast is the gold standard, and I'd appreciate it very much. Thanks in advance. Are you ready to go on a deep dive? Let's talk about Neptune today. Hi, everybody. Thomas Miller on the Fun Astrology Podcast for Tuesday, June 18th. We're going to talk about Neptune because we don't have any aspects in the sky today. We had that big day yesterday. And because Neptune is very prominent at the end of the week. Thursday for solstice, it squares the sun a couple of hours before solstice, Thursday afternoon. And it's also prominent on Friday for the full moon. So after that big energy day yesterday, we get a break today. Tomorrow, the moon moves into Sagittarius at 12:30 Eastern, so that lightens things up for a couple of days. And then the big crescendo to the week, Thursday's solstice and Friday's full moon. And you know, if it wasn't for those placements, you might almost glance over Neptune this week. But those of you who are observant in looking and studying at your charts will notice that Neptune is right there at the point or the peak of the T-square of Friday's full moon. Sun and moon opposite each other, and really we have to bring in two other planets because right there with the sun is Venus and Mercury. So those three musketeers, all freshly right there in Cancer, are opposite the moon, and they're 90 degrees to Neptune. Now, speaking of 90 degrees, I need to throw another log on the fire. Let me step away from that conversation for just a second. Today is also the 14-day window beginning the next moon wobble. What in the world is a moon wobble? It's when the sun is either conjunct or 90 degrees to the nodes of the moon. This time it's the square. It will be 90 degrees to the nodes, peaking on July 2nd. So this is 14 days back. I forgot to mention this last week, but if you're a 21-day counter, then we've been in it for a week. But let's start the 14-day clock today, counting down to July 2nd, when the sun and the nodes will be in an exact square as well. That's an aside, but I wanted to get that in there. And not to minimize the moon wobble, because this whole thing of the Israeli-Hamas conflict, that happened right before the 21-day window back in October of last fall. So I just respect that this is something that was pointed out, gosh, now almost 100 years ago. And it does have merit, I think. It's worth keeping an eye on. The guy who created, kind of termed or monikered the moon wobble, Carl Payne Toby, by the way, the original editor of Astrology magazine. Carl Payne Toby was also best friends with a guy by the name of Grant Louis. Some of you have heard that name. Grant Louis was one of the teachers of Linda Goodman, who was one of the teachers of Robert Glasscock, who has been one of the teachers of all of us. So we have a lineage connecting back to Carl Payne Toby. Even though Robert Glasscock doesn't acknowledge the moon wobble, I think there's something to it for sure. If you just think about it by structure, there's something to it. All right, let's shift away from that now and come back to Neptune. Neptune was discovered in 1846. It actually was discovered based on a mathematical calculation by the observation by telescope of the orbit of Uranus being slightly disrupted. Uranus being discovered in 1781. Uranus is the second slowest mover out there, 164 years to go around the sun. It became the modern ruler, if you will, of the sign of Pisces, theretofore which had been ruled by Jupiter. So the characteristics that we would attribute to Pisces are also blended in with Neptune, and that is, obviously, this connection to something beyond the physical realm. And it's interesting where astrology was at that point, because the Catholic Church had tried to eradicate astrology back in the more Middle Ages, weren't successful, but there was this kind of blackout period or this lull period that only kicked into a revival maybe 75 years later. So it's interesting that during the mid to late 1800s that Uranus was tagged as a malefic. I wonder if it had come as a 1-2 with Pluto in the more 1900s, that it might have been attributed a little bit differently. I don't know, but it certainly has a dark shadow. That's lies, deceptions, illusion, delusion. On its shadowiest side, it can distort reality. On the positive side, it gives us that connection to our higher self. And that is a contrast. I could either lie Or I could bridge myself to basically the doorstep of enlightenment. Liz Green wrote a deep book, hard to read, called Neptune, and she said that it's the theme or the drumbeat of our redemption, our returning to source. In mythology, Neptune was the god or the lord of the sea, and it is about going into the depths of our soul is the image. Going to the depths in order to find our purpose, our reason, the source that we departed from, theoretically, when we came down here to experience another incarnation on Earth. Man, that right there should get your attention if you're on a spiritual path, right? Well, what do we have that comes as an obstacle to that? The lies we tell ourselves. Exactly. Like that this is real, like the physical is more important than the spiritual. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a, you're already filling it in. Exactly. Human experience. So squaring the sun Thursday and being in the T-square on Friday during a full moon, the sky is pointing us to possibly a hurdle that we need to clear or a hurdle we need to address that on the positive side will allow us to continue to grow into that very spiritual path. Think about it this way. If there was one last hurdle between you and complete spiritual enlightenment, let's say, salvation, nirvana, heaven, full open awareness, one obstacle left. We know there's not one, but I'm just saying if there was one obstacle left and you could clear it this week, on the other side of it would be complete open spiritual connection. How diligently would you work on clearing that one area? Well, that's how we can think of the rest of this week. Is there only one hurdle left? Obviously no. We peel the onion all the way through. But I'm just saying, if you contextualized it, if you visualized this in that light, then that would shift everything for the rest of the week, would it not? To say, wow, I am going to so take this seriously and just open up with my journal, with prayer, with meditation, with yoga, with however you connect, and really dig in and ask your intuitive guidance to open those areas up and show you the full light. In other words, pull the lies and the deception and the cloudy fogginess of Neptune back and let yourself see it the way it really is. That's the picture. Hope that helps, and I love you so much on your journey. Have a great day.